Hey guys, welcome to The Pillars, the podcast of the 363rd ISR Wing of the United States Air Force. I'm Dr. Jerry.
I'm Dr. Reed.
And I'm Sergeant Joe.
This week on The Pillars, we're talking about existential crises. Yay. Basically a big fancy term for, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. So come hear about Joe talk about how she wanted to be a veterinarian and how I was going to be a Navy SEAL and how Dr. Reed wanted to be a baker on this week's episode of The Pillars.
So Jerry, tell me, what did you want to be when you were younger?
This is kind of embarrassing, but I, at one point in time, wanted to be a Navy SEAL.
Nice.
Yeah.
Say more.
That's not embarrassing.
What happened?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You really let yourself go.
Thank you. Yes, I sure did. Well, it just something about the image that was portrayed in society just really appealed to me, and just being a bad A and being very physically fit, and all the other things that go with being a military member, serving our country, defending freedom. So from an early age, I mean, we're talking like 10, 11 years old, I started getting really into swimming, physical fitness. At one point, I was swimming almost 2 miles a day.
Dang.
Wow.
I was running about 30 miles a week, and I was doing all kinds of push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, that kind of thing, just trying to get as fit as possible. My doctor actually my pediatrician told me I had to stop because I was getting like stress fractures all over my body.
Dang.
But I was in really good shape. And then my parents kind of, when they saw like how serious I was getting about this, and like, no kidding, I was going to try to like graduate high school and go join the Navy, they put a cans on that and said, no, if you're going to join the military, you got to at least go to college first. And so that kind of changed my whole direction.
We're kind of joking, like, geez, Jerry, what happened to you? But like,
Right, yeah.
I think we all know you to be a pretty high-performing guy, so that story is not all that surprising. Joe, what about you? What did you want to be when you were little?
I wanted to be a veterinarian, like probably 90% of young females. And I just always have a connection with animals, loved them, worked with them. I brought every animal possible home. My parents were constantly putting up like found cat, found dog flyers, right? Like, I never stole any pets out of anybody's backyard, but you would say it was probably pretty close. Like if I had a bleeding heart for a pet, I thought I could take care of it better than anybody. So I really had that passion. But when I graduated, my parents had divorced, and college money just went out the window. And so I have 3 older brothers. They had better options when my parents were together to go to college, so they got college. By the time I got out of high school, there wasn't a lot of options. I never thought I'd ever be in the military. Didn't even take the ASVAB or anything in high school. Walked out, was like, I'm going to go do other stuff. And then about a year after I joined the Air Force for college, I really wanted to do my 4 years, get my college, and then get into some med school to be a veterinarian. And found my passion with mental health. I think I went from helping animals to helping people, and it's been awesome. I wouldn't have changed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't blame you.
I see a lot of parallels, and I think this question is important, and Reed, you're next, so be thinking about how you're going to answer it. But I think it's interesting because as we grow up and we start to pursue different avenues, or life just comes in the way and excludes certain possibilities for us, we still try to pursue things that are in line with some of those values, like helping other people.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So Reed, what did you want to be?
Okay, guys, well, I don't think this will surprise anyone. First, I wanted to be a baker. And that really only had anything to do with the fact that I love donuts. And I could really see myself eating some donuts throughout my life. So that's kind of where initially I went. But on a more serious note, I think I really wanted to be an astronaut. And as a young kid, I was just completely preoccupied with anything that had to do with space, planetary science, and so I had this jean jacket that I would go around to air shows and collect patches, and so
nice.
I knew vaguely that I would probably have to be a pilot at some point, and so I collected these patches from all these different airframes, and I had an uncle that was a defense contractor out of Edwards Air Force Base, and he would send me all kinds of stuff related. This is when the B-2 was had just come out, And so he was sending me these patches, and I thought they were so cool. No one else knew anything about the B-2, but I had them on my black jean jacket. So I was this super dorky kid with all these patches on my jacket. But one day, Jerry, you were talking about going to your pediatrician. I went to my pediatrician, and I'll never forget, he was asking me this question, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be an astronaut. And he said, oh, well, good luck with that. Like, you're going to be way too tall, one, to be a pilot, and that's a pretty typical career path for an astronaut is to be on some kind of airframe. And he's like, you would probably never fit into like the cockpit of the space shuttle. You're going to be too tall. And that's really all it took for me, and I was crushed.
Wow.
Right? And so I don't know what I did exactly, but I went through this kind of career crisis and kind of went through a funk at a very young age, trying to reform identity and trying to figure out what it is I want to do. And I think that's where this podcast is starting to go is, how do we formulate our identities, right? And whether that's occupational or personal. And sometimes we experience threats to that, whether that's a well-meaning pediatrician that tells you, oh, you probably wouldn't be cut out for that. Or there may be other threats to your identity, occupational or personal or otherwise in your life that you have to grapple with.
And that's exactly why we're talking about this, because we like to align our identity with our values, with our passions. And when those things become disaligned for whatever reason, it causes this inner turmoil, not just cognitive dissonance, but really like a spiritual kind of dissonance. And so if you, and I'm sure there are plenty many people out there going through a sort of existential crisis right now, in their personal lives or even in their careers, where they find that the direction their life is going or the way that their career is going is maybe not in alignment with where they thought they would be or where they might currently want to be.
Yeah, definitely. There's nothing more exciting and damaging when you see your troop surpass you in career.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is something that was very difficult for me. I had a, bright burner. I knew he was going to go all the way. And then he passed me, and I was like, what does that mean for me? When you look at your EPRs, you try to figure out, I'm doing everything right there. You talk to your leadership, I'm doing everything right there.
Made you start to question yourself.
Definitely, yeah. And you're kind of like, okay, I'm this age, with this rank, at this point in my career, where do I go? And it's scary. It can be very overwhelming and scary. And
you're talking about, kind of in a roundabout way, two different things. You're talking about the expectations you have for yourself, but also the shoulds. Yep. The expectations that you perceive are coming from other people. And so it's almost like this tacit implication that you should have been able to promote before this other person who came in later than you. But you didn't do that. Therefore, you failed? You made a mistake? You're not good enough? I know I'm putting words in your mouth, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm being demeaning, but were these some of the thoughts that you had?
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited. But then I'm also upset at myself, and so you don't want to show that to the member, when the member made Mass Sergeant, or Tech Sergeant, and you're sitting there and you're like, well, I'm a couple years into my rank already, and you haven't really made the next one. It's interesting. It's an interesting internal dialogue that you really have to kind of sit and evaluate yourself. And I would say it was like kind of a mini like midlife crisis situation. It was definitely a moment where I had to reflect with other peers.
I'm glad you said that word. Yeah, I think we'll pick up on midlife crisis. But it also occurs to me that this could happen for the person who's promoting as well, right? Like you may have job satisfaction doing what you're doing. And I'll just pick on people working at the tactical level right now, right? You may be a technical expert and really enjoy what you do and enjoy the level of expertise and how people look to you in that role. And now you promote, maybe you're supervising more people. It's a new role. You've anticipated it. You can maybe even be excited about it. But you may experience some diminished job satisfaction as you fumble around trying to figure out, what is it that I do here? I'm used to being a little bit more in the weeds, but now I'm working at this higher echelon and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. And you might notice that you're not as practiced, you're not as facile at your job as you used to be, and it starts to eke out sideways in diminished job satisfaction. Maybe your relationships are impacted. And that might coincide with, you said, midlife crisis. That might coincide with a period of time in your life when a lot of things are on the table for you identity-wise, and
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out, who am I?
And I say midlife crisis only is in the fact that we do age twice as fast. So in your 30s, right, you can find yourself in a situation.
We can call it mid-military career.
There we go.
How's that? I think
Yeah.
that's probably more appropriate because in a lot of ways, our military career, whether you do 4 years or 20 plus, you get to that midpoint, and there can be like a dramatic shift. Like you're talking about assuming a managerial or leadership type role, where all of a sudden what you're doing now is perhaps new and foreign to you. And it's not necessarily as rewarding as what you initially came in wanting to do, which is hopefully something more kind of aligned with your passion. But we see this in a lot of other areas of our lives as well. I'm personally working with a handful of folks who are in their 20s and a few even in their young 30s who feel like at this point in time they should be married or they should have a family, and they feel like they're no closer to pursuing that goals, and so those goals, and so they have a lot of shame and a lot of guilt about that.
That's a great point. A lot of people, you do hear that in practice a lot, where people will say some of the sacrifices that they made relative to their military experience just include putting other goals on hold, and not only for themselves, but potentially for their family members, right, who are along for the ride a lot of the times. And they experience some kind of thwarting in their growth, or they can't experience it that way. And a lot of this stuff comes up a lot of times around periods of transition. And we were kind of joking. I think it just dawned on all of us here before we started recording that, we do work with a lot of people doing career counseling, career transition kind of stuff, especially as they're getting ready to leave military service, and they're trying to figure out what is that next thing. And we're kind of laughing because that course that's offered for transitioning members is called TAPS, right?
Yeah.
And we play TAPS at the end of a day, but also at funerals or at memorial ceremonies. And for a lot of people, that end of their military career can feel as dramatic as a death, right? It's the death of one kind of identity.
That's right.
And it can leave people just reeling, what is next? What kind of identity will I create for myself in the next chapter of my life?
Yeah, that transition from Sergeant so-and-so to, Mrs. so-and-so, or from Colonel so-and-so to Mr. so-and-so, it hits some people very hard, especially if you came in like fresh out of high school. A lot of your identity probably became wrapped up in who you were in the military. That became a part of who you are. And in losing that, I think many people go through a sort of grieving process, and they don't know necessarily who they are without that piece of their identity.
And I think we've seen a lot of examples of how people deal with it.
I'm glad you brought that up, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen folks that they'll roll right back into a DoD contract,
Absolutely.
right? They want to stay in that family, which is okay. They come in as a contractor or GS. I've also seen folks that go completely opposite, and they start growing the beard, and they start taking a year of hiatus, or
maybe they find their new identity in some of these veterans groups.
Yep, definitely. And there's no right or wrong, I think, is what we're getting at.
Right.
It's really just, are you projecting forward, and what is your identity?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There really is no right or wrong. People do this in a lot of different ways, and I certainly wouldn't want to be very prescriptive about it. But based on our experience, kind of collected around the table here, we probably have seen people coping with identity crisis, whether that's a personal identity crisis, a work identity crisis, or a midlife identity crisis. There are some stereotypical ways that we see people coping, like maybe they go out and buy that new sports car. Or what have you guys seen? What works well for people? What tends to not work well?
Well, say some of the first signs of this are just a general sense of dissatisfaction with life, with your job, with relationships, and maybe a lacking of motivation. You lose motivation and drive for the things that used to provide that for you. And I think a lot of times these are little red flags that may symbol that existential or identity crisis that's going on. I think when this happens, it's a good time for us to step back and kind of take stock of where we are, where we, you know, perhaps thought we would be or think we should be at that point in time, and then determine if there is some kind of course recorrection that needs to take place. And sometimes this may involve some very big decisions. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's making small little changes or fulfilling you know, perceived gaps in your life. Or you know, pursuing things, certain areas of your life that you've been neglecting for whatever reason.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because you're talking about a proactive approach
Yes.
to kind of getting after this. I think what we tend to see a lot is that someone is going through this crisis and there's some thrash or flail going on.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they got themselves into debt buying a new sports car, or they started to look outside the relationship, you know, maybe thinking,
Perfect example.
maybe happiness or satisfaction will come in a new relationship partner for me, and that creates problems with your current relationship partner. And so I think we tend to see a lot of this stuff walking through our office door at the point where there's now some problem associated with some adjustment issues related to these big life changes. So you're advocating for a more proactive approach. Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. I think the first step is to be kind to yourself. You're recognizing that there's a out of alignment, right? And you are looking to seek to correct that, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. There's no guilt or shame. Communicate it, seek help, reach out, really look at that support network, and then if it is a new sports car, talk to, you know, budget, finance, make a plan, make sure you can afford it, and then go pick it out.
Yeah.
But do it not on a spontaneous whim, thinking it's going to fulfill some type of void. It might not be as well thought out.
I'm confident someone in the listening audience just heard sports car and went, oh, I just made the biggest mistake of my life.
I mean, when you drive on base, they're all passing you. We
you
have
all
the
drive
nicest cars.
much better cars
I'll
than
just
I
check
do.
out the
That
lemon
is
lot.
true. Yeah.
But you're right. There can be a sort of call to action, or when you're going through a tough time, you know, say a major life transition, you want to inject some goodness into your life, and so maybe it is buying that new car or starting a new relationship or something along those lines. All that to say, under high periods of stress or when you're experiencing some of those signs of an existential or identity crisis, try not to impulsively make those major life decisions without careful reflection.
Joe, I really like what you said. You know, reach out for help. And I know that we're big advocates for that. And when we say that, we don't always necessarily mean, you know, go seek professional help. It may be that someone that is sitting right next to you has gone through something similar, and there's a wealth of resources and mentorship that's available wherever you are.
Talk to your significant other, reach out to your peers, your friends, and really just try to, you know, connect. Make sure that if you're in this boat and you're like, hey, I'm not where I thought I was going to be, it's okay, and reach out.
I guarantee you're not alone.
Yeah.
Hey team, we want to thank you again for tuning in to the Pillars podcast of the 363rd ISR Wing. Hope you have a great day.